This episode of the Fine Homebuilding podcast is brought to you by Marvin. When it comes to performance and lead times, trust is everything. Marvin gets that. Now their Marvin Elevate and Essential collections have significantly lower lead times. You know these windows and doors for their beautiful designs, durable Ultrex fiberglass, on-trend styles and colorways. Well, now you can have them delivered to your project in less time to help keep your timeline intact. Speaking of trust, Marvin's shipping complete and delivered, as promised, more than 90% of the time across all products and options. So when you want the right performance, right on time, know Marvin delivers.
You need some really fancy, like Diamondback workwear. What else do you need that's really
Duck
expensive?
blaster. He's going to need a DG 1000 or two manometers.
You need some really awesome German pencils that are monogrammed with your company name.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Senior Editor Brian Pontalillo.
Good morning.
Fine Homebuilding contributing editor and production manager at TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant.
Hello.
And our senior producer, Jeff Rhodes.
Howdy.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's great to see you guys this morning. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, good morning.
I'm going to plug our after show right away because I think it's going to be a powerhouse. We're going to talk to Ian and Brian about low as you can go, net zero. And they've recently built themselves high-performance homes, and I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation. So thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you both. You've come off these incredibly labor-intensive projects, right? Do you still on the weekends desire to do carpentry and work on the places you built?
I've only recently got back into it. I would say I got the house to done enough for now and then didn't do anything for a solid year and a half. And now I'm back to putting flooring in the basement, want to build the ground level deck out the bedroom sliding door. So I've been reinvigorated recently, but only recently.
Ian, what was it that made you want to work on it again?
Part of it was seeing the values of the properties around me that were built around the same time that are now selling again, seeing what some of them are going for and thinking about what that added equity in my home could do for Sarah and I if we wanted to buy other property. So it's kind of kicked me a little bit to like, hey, maybe I should finish this because there's a chance the house has appreciated more in value and we could do something with that extra equity. But only if I finish it. Like it's got to be done when they come and look at it again, right?
You've finished more recently, Brian. What about you?
Well, interestingly, I would just kind of mirror Ian's sentiments. When we first moved in and we were getting back to work, it was, we're probably right 99% done. I mean, I have, trim to finish, nail holes to fill. One significant project in the basement, I talked about a little bit about this on last week's podcast, but shelving and closets and things like that to do. But I haven't done anything since October. Since we moved in. I mean, anything meaning like, anything of significance. I built a shed this spring and needed to do that. And it was a fun project, but on the house itself. But for me, part of it is not like sort of inspiration or invigoration as much as it is just, I want to enjoy doing it. And when you don't have the time to really enjoy doing it, when it feels rushed, you're trying to cram in a project, in an hour here and an hour there, it's just not as fun. So I'm just I've been waiting for the right time when I can, actually just sort of get involved in projects. And that time's on the horizon now. So this fall, I'm looking forward to doing a bunch of those kind of trim things that I mentioned, like finishing some built-ins and shelving and closets and all that kind of jazz.
Yep.
And also, also like Ian, I do have like, I can't help but have some ambitions for some future projects. There's a bunch of houses in our neighborhood that are ripe for remodeling. Like they just need it, right? The next homeowners are going to have to remodel and update these houses. And I keep thinking if any of these houses go for sale right on our street, that might be a great opportunity to have a fun project and, maybe a financially sensible project, depending on the circumstances.
The Mike Girton School of Real Estate Development, right?
Right. Yeah. Own everything in the neighborhood.
And like his process defies all conventional wisdom, as I understand it. You're supposed to buy multifamily. You're not supposed to buy single family. You're not supposed to hold on to them for a long time. But it seems to have worked out well for him, which is kind of interesting.
I think there's, sweat equity is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
And Mike does all that work himself.
Yep.
And Mike really takes that to an extreme where he does all that work himself.
Right.
So weekend projects, Jeff?
Had a big branch come down, just brushed the deck railing on its way out.
No. Your brand new deck railing.
It just brushed it, so no damage there. So I wound up, cutting that up, and that was about it.
I tore into my basement, I think I told y'all, and I took a weekend off, but I'm going to be back into it. I have to go to and do a huge shopping trip at the home center. It's going to be likely several $100s worth of stuff, and I hate that. I hate that process. I mean, it's a small room, Ian, but it's just a hassle, like trying to get around people in their Miracle-Gro and all of it. So I'm probably go on Friday night just to hopefully have the store be less busy so I can putz around and pick through the lumber and load drywall by myself. Well,
Hey,
go ahead.
Patrick, can I throw out the first question of the podcast? And it relates to my next weekend project.
Always.
And I'd love to hear all your thoughts on it. And even any listeners who have thoughts on it could chime in for a future episode, because I'm sure it'll be a few weekends before I get to it. So last week I described the biggest blunder that I made on this house, the biggest building blunder, which was that we have a small front porch in the neighborhood of 5 feet by 6 feet. It's just really a covered landing for the front door, and I just installed the concrete piers for that porch a little too close to the backfill, a little too close to the overdig. And there was some settling this winter and the front porch was dropping and I had to jack it up. And all in all, I had to bring it up about 3 inches. And so it seems to have stabilized, right? We had a wet winter with some freeze and thaw cycles. So it seemed to happen during those winter months, and it hasn't dropped at all since probably March. So I think it's time to do a more permanent. Right now, there's just blocks underneath the post. So I think it's time to do a more permanent repair. And so just a little note about the construction. Essentially, I have 2 concrete piers, frost step piers in the ground for the porch. And I have 4x4 posts that go from the piers all the way up to the roof. And then the beam for the porch is fastened to those posts with structural screws. So it's one post, it's one post all the way up. And I need to determine how to best now those posts are 3 inches short. So I need to determine how best to make a permanent fix for this. I'm thinking about extending the concrete piers up so that they will be higher than grade. I'm thinking about cutting the posts off at the bottom of the porch and adding some 6x6 posts beneath the porch. But, I'm wondering if I'm missing anything. And, I know the code allows for you to bury your posts right in your footing. So I'm wondering if I should just be pouring concrete around the posts. So any thoughts I would really love to hear.
So the piers have created a situation where the posts are at grade level. They're not above it at all.
It'll be just about grade, I think, where the top of the piers are now, because I had them extending just a few inches above grade.
That's kind of a conundrum. At first I thought about adding a pair of 2x4s horizontally in what I imagine you have U-shaped post brackets holding and just cribbing it up that way, they would be horizontal, spanning post to post, so it wouldn't be like these little wobbly 3-inch square blocks of wood, right?
Right.
But they're going to be touching the ground most likely unless you dig out around it, right?
That's right.
I actually like Patrick's idea. And that's a pretty good one because it keeps you within the standard methodology of like Simpson hangers and the post brackets, because you would just run that, I guess, a 4x4 if you're about 3 inches across from pier to pier, and then you could use the standard same kind of post to beam bracket on top of that. So it keeps you with already engineered methods.
And I like that you're not cutting the post. I think those kind of posts are way stronger when they span from the floor system up to the roof, right? If you interrupt them in any way, I think it's way flimsier.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I had other ideas, but I like your idea.
What was your idea?
Well, I was thinking the 6x6 on top was kind of a nice way to go because it would look purposeful, but I think what you're proposing is more purposeful.
And easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it not only looks purposeful, it is purposeful.
Yeah.
Now, tell me your thoughts on that. You know, the IRC, I believe, does have drawings that show that you can put your posts for a foot, like a deck footing, for example. You can put them right into the concrete.
I think that's folly. I think that is complete folly.
You think they're just going to rot real fast?
Yeah, because I've seen it happen with fence posts, right? It's a common way to put in fence posts, and they always rot right at the top of the concrete because water just sits in there.
I think the challenge you would have would be pouring the extra layer of concrete in a stable way on top of that existing pier. I think if you wanted to do something that was a masonry-based solution, you could get a solid block and just grout it to the top of the concrete pier. You know, but that gets into the, are you a mason or are you a carpenter? What's your material of choice? Which way do you want to go?
And you need something that's exactly 3 inches, you know, and I don't know if, I think a solid block is 4, and maybe there's pavers that, you know, are the right thickness or a combination of.
There are other thinner style solid blocks that masonry specialist outfits would have, but you'd almost have to do it in reverse order, where you would bolt your post cap to the brick or to the block first, hang it from the post, and then grout up to that level with some sort of non-shrink structural grout. But again, if you were a mason, that would be what you would do, because that's your standard everyday materials.
Yeah.
You know, dude, it's also like, I'm sure you built this thing with screws. It doesn't take long to unscrew the band joist and a few pieces of decking and just put in longer posts, right? You know, and if you did it one at a time, the structural challenge would be minimized because, you know, it's largely going to hold up itself with one post.
It's true, and the posts are fastened at the roof with a hanger or a Simpson bracket that I could easily unscrew.
Yeah. So,
okay,
tell us what you do.
I'll let you know. I'll take some photos.
Oh man! So as always, we heard from our fantastic listeners, and I really appreciate all of you who write into the podcast. It really makes the show much better. This comes from Jonathon. Hello, Patrick and crew. Thanks for the great work you do, and thanks to Ian for representing the upper Midwest. On episode 581, you tried to help Sam with a sound dampening problem in a rented house. While various solutions were suggested, the solution of heavy fabric or dense foam materials can prove to be a highly effective, ultra-temporary solution for this. While working for Kimberly-Clark, a virtual charity auction was held for personal care products, and so I bid on some toilet paper. What I didn't know was that 1, the toilet paper was not for a pack of 12, but for a case of 4 packs. 2, bidding low and expecting to get outbid on most of your bids was delusional. Naive me ends up winning 19 cases or 76 packs or 912 rolls of toilet paper. I ended up pulling up to the warehouse and somehow, by the grace of God, packing all these away in my tiny Saturn SL sedan. What that turned into was the single quietest ride of my life. I heard neither other cars, road noise, or even my own engine. I felt at ease and completely relaxed. What better to ease my stress than complete silence and knowing that if I crash, the toilet paper will cushion the impact? I learned that a personal, portable, anti-echoic chamber is only 912 rolls of toilet paper away. Maybe Sam should look at the paper products aisle of Target for some acoustic treatment. Regards from a hobbyist home remodeler, Jonathon. That's hilarious. I wonder what 912 rolls of toilet paper looks like. You know,
looks like the aisle at the store.
In past life, I worked commercial cleaning, and there were big storage rooms of toilet paper, but there was nowhere near 912 rolls. That is so funny. Jonathon, thanks for that. This comes from Jim. Dear FHB plumbers, not the Watergate kind, in podcast 583 you discuss cleaning a tankless on-demand water heater. When we built our house in 2008, we had a Rinnai propane unit installed. A few years later, I learned it needed to be cleaned annually. I called a plumber, and he said he didn't want to waste my money and told me how to clean it myself. He also told me that there were several YouTube videos that explain how to do it. With a small investment of a transfer pump, around $65 at Harbor Freight, and some short washing machine hoses, a bucket and a gallon of white vinegar, you are all set. All it takes is turning off the power, gas, and water to and from the heater. Then attach the hoses at the connections at the bottom of the unit from a bucket filled with vinegar and pump it through to circulate it through the heater for an hour or so, and then flush it with water for a few minutes. It is amazing how much junk it cleans out, and we have public water service. I've attached a copy of my instructions, which I keep taped to the heater. We did have to have the burner unit cleaned a couple years ago by a plumber when the burner unit in the heater stopped working, something I would never attempt to do, but I was happy to hold the flashlight. I do have a plumbing question. We have a problem with our water staining the fiberglass shower tray and fiberglass bathtubs a copper green. It does scrub off, but it's a hassle. My research has shown that either the water pH or electrolysis in the water is causing the shower and faucet fixtures to slowly corrode, hence discoloring the fiberglass. Our water softener company tests the water annually when they service the unit, and the pH is neutral. I've read that the water pipes need to be grounded to neutralize the electrolysis. The problem is, how do I ground a system that is in 99% PEX pipe, except for the water connection around the water heater and the faucets? Thank you, as always, for an interesting, informative, and entertaining podcast. Even though, as a lonely homeowner, I don't understand half of what you were talking about, but I am learning. Well, Jim, I suspect that we don't know what we're talking about half the time, so there you go. What do you think? What's causing this green discoloration on his fiberglass bath fixtures?
Something in the water. I've seen it on other bathrooms, but never figured out what it is. I've had a lot of different plumbers tell me different stuff, and it usually is around electrolysis and pH or something in the water, but he's saying he's had it tested, so it's hard to say.
Jeff, Brian?
I even did not very much, but a quick Google search on this, and I got the same answers that he did. And, when I looked sort of quickly, I was curious about minerals, but I think mineral staining tends to be brown.
Or white. It's white in my house.
Or white, yeah, but not green that he's experiencing. So
every time I've seen it, it's like a very bright Statue of Liberty.
Verdigris.
Green.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
It's copper.
Yeah, it's copper. Yeah. Where is the copper coming from is the question.
Right.
But the water test would show that, right? If they do a full water test?
If they did it from that faucet, you would assume so, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know why the water softener company doesn't know what this problem is and how to fix it. Isn't that their job? Isn't that like what they're supposed to be doing?
Is it? Is it their job?
Well, it's not like it's the bath fan. It's, they analyze water and they recommend treatment.
We're going to ask a lot of questions and not give a lot of answers, but I wonder if the water softener company just tests for the things that the water softener is meant to mitigate.
Right.
It doesn't look beyond that.
Correct. That's what I meant by is it their job?
I almost
test
wonder
for
if it's a
that.
result of the water softener, taking the other minerals out.
Ooh. Let's blame the water softener. That's what I say. Isn't it like acid water that it brings the copper out of whatever copper things are in the domestic water system? I don't know. We are deeply into the realm of stuff I should not be talking about.
It sounded brilliant, though. We should just go with that.
And I also don't know if you can ground PEX piping system. It doesn't seem like, even if it has some metal fixtures on it, it seems like the interruptions, some copper fixtures, it seems like the interruptions of PEX would make it not possible to ground, right?
Once again, we are deeply into the realm of things that I should not be talking about. Hey, hopefully some of our listeners have thoughts on both of these subjects because, water considerations, clarity, minerals, all of it is super interesting. And I'd like to know more. This comes from, oh my gosh, forgive me. I will look it up and put it on the podcast, but this is regarding LED lighting from podcast 583. I was listening to episode 583 when you were talking about LED strip lighting. I too was confused with all the different options and connections. A few things that have worked for me. I've done my kitchen and coffee bar with LEDs hot glued to strips of hardwood with a 3/8-inch routed groove on the underside. This really helped keep the strip secured without drooping or losing the sticky backing over time. The barrel connects is listed below from Amazon. He has a link. Make it super easy to disconnect if you ever have to do any resoldering or replace a strip. Also, soldering is the only way to go. Just be sure to melt/scrape off the thin layer of silicone that covers the leads on the strips. If you're looking for a practical project with LED strip lighting, try doing underbed lighting with 2700K strips. Mounted about a foot under the bed, wired to the occupancy sensors below make nighttime arrivals or departures from the bed less hazardous. I've attached a picture from my project. 3 zones, 3 different sensors, left, right, and foot of the bed. It is a game changer. This is one of the coolest things I have ever seen, right? So what he did is he's got like this kind of platform bed, and on the underside of the platform are his strip lights, and it just illuminates the floor so you don't fall when you get in and out of bed. Super cool. Am I right?
Yeah.
I've seen it done in kitchens and bathrooms a lot as night lighting.
I think
very
it's
cool.
Yeah.
And he included some products that worked well for him, and boy, what a great idea. And I am regretting I didn't get this person's name, and I'm sorry. Well, thanks again, listeners, for those of you who write in with comments on the show. Our first question comes from Alex. Hey, podcast crew. I just posted this on the GBA forum, and it occurred to me that I should ask the podcast, too. Do you have any thoughts? I love the podcast. Alex writes, my son's room is incredibly humid, sometimes 76%. We're in Western Mass. The room is south-facing, and the wood clapboards outside get baked by the sun. We had mini splits and had cellulose blown into the wall cavities a couple years ago. He keeps his AC set quite low, like 68 or 70. I am vaguely familiar with terms like vapor drive and had limited understanding of building science in general, but after some research, I suspect the sun is driving vapor into the walls, and it is condensing on the backside of his cool plaster walls, making the room humid. Does this sound plausible? Is it a result of having cellulose blown in? And if this has been happening for a year or two, is there likely a mold problem in his walls? How should I address the humidity and the possibility of a mold problem? Thanks for any advice. I'll put the link to the GBA page where some smart folks have weighed in on this. What do you guys think? Is this a plausible explanation for the high humidity in this room?
I think it's plausible. I don't think it's likely.
What do you think it is?
I suspect that by blowing in the cellulose, it created some other condition inside the house that is bringing humidity into this room. Stack effect, adjacent bathroom. I think there's something else that's trapping it in there and not letting it get out. And as a connoisseur of air conditioning, I would say that is not a low AC set point. That is a medium AC set point.
I think Liam's is 61.
That's what I'm talking about. That's a bit more in the range. I would also wonder if he doesn't have it actually set low enough to get rid of that humidity.
I want to ask about wet basements, Alex. Wet basements are a common problem of interior humidity in the living space, and as Ian suggests, it's often stack effect that it's bringing it into spaces from below.
Yeah. Yep. What I know about cellulose is that it should help with the inward vapor drive, not not make it more of a problem. It has a quality of taking on and redistributing moisture. So, and also, plaster walls can dry to the interior. So, I doubt it would be that. And yeah, so what is the moisture source? And then are the mini splits functioning well enough to dehumidify? If they're short cycling, if the system sized wrong, they may not be, and if it's not set low enough, they may not be dehumidifying.
Yep. There are also dehumidifying settings on many splits that might be useful to try anyway.
Yeah, some of them have what's called a dry setting.
Yeah.
That's the terminology that ours uses, and that's what it's meant to do.
I would also check the filter on that mini split and make sure that it is running at its optimal. I have noticed with our units that we have at home that, through the year as it picks up dust and other stuff in the filter, it does affect the performance of the unit.
The condensate drain has to be working, or you can blow a bunch of humidity into living spaces with AC units. I don't know if mini splits would tell you if it wasn't.
It'll just start dumping water into your
on the
space,
floor,
like
right?
a waterfall. Yeah.
I would be tempted to pull off a clapboard and see what's going on behind that wall too. I mean, if it's reasonably accessible, why not? And I would certainly look for thermal bypasses that are allowing damp basement air to be getting into the house.
And check your bath venting too, because if you had improperly vented bathrooms and you had a house that didn't have much insulation in it and was naturally drying itself out, but now you've trapped it with a bunch of blown in cellulose, the room in question could just be the path of least resistance for that moisture to go to.
That's an interesting thought. It's not like the bath fan is ever installed incorrectly. Jeff, do you have thoughts on this?
My first thought was the basement, because with plaster walls, it sounds like an older house. So notoriously leaky basements.
Yeah.
I think it brings up an interesting thought point about the unintended consequences of some of the high performance or energy retrofit things like blowing in cellulose. You do have to think through what else you're going to affect in your house by doing that, and make sure that you're mitigating those things as part of that work as well.
For decades we were putting cellulose into old houses, and now we're figuring out what happens sometimes. There was a bunch of early paint failures, but of course some things take longer to show up.
Right.
What do you advise your clients, Ian, when they're considering, these kind of performance upgrades on their old homes? How do you ensure that you don't have unintended consequences?
Well, for us, they're normally part of a larger project, so we are tackling some of those items as part of a larger project. For us, it's almost never just insulating walls. We would kick them off to our insulator if that was all that they wanted to do. But we are finding frequently our mechanical contractors will come in at what should be kind of the waning end of the contract estimate and blow the budget by pointing out all the things that are wrong with the existing HVAC system. And not wrong in and of themselves, but wrong how they don't match up with what the new space is going to be. And some pretty wholesale changes that end up having to be done with zoning, ductwork, and even the furnace unit itself.
And this is after the project is
no, this is right when we're trade walkthroughs, the designs figured out, the clients who bought in, and it's like, oh, this thing that you thought was going to be $8,000 worth of HVAC, we should really chuck the whole system. So, if you want to do this, it's probably more like 30. And we've had
what
that
I've
happen
heard is
a
that
couple times.
ductwork is almost never done correctly and almost always needs to be redone. Is that correct?
That's a good way to put it.
I've heard that from performance contractors, but especially on the return air side, it's almost always undersized. What were we talking about? Oh, this humid room. Yeah, okay. That was
Unintended consequences.
right. Steve writes, "Hey gang, thanks for the feedback in episode 521 regarding local code enforcement and blower door testing. Ian said, maybe you should become the blower door guy. This was already something I was wanting to do. So in the time since I last emailed you, I opened an LLC and bought a blower door. Then with financial assistance from the local gas company's Workforce Development Fund, I've gotten a number of certifications from BPI. So thanks, Ian, for getting me to spend thousands of dollars. I guess an all-access membership doesn't sting anymore, but a discount to GBA would be cool. In all seriousness,
I think you should get a nice new van to drive around too, Steve. Some like a Mercedes one of the big ones.
And you're going to want it custom lettered and wrapped, right?
Look at one of those next.
In all seriousness, I do have a huge debt of gratitude to everyone that has hosted this podcast, as well as others in the FHB sphere of influence, including Reisinger's Build Show podcast, the Building Science podcast, the Unbuilded podcast, E3 with Emily Mottram, and the Contracting Handbook. The rabbit hole of building science has reawakened my love of learning, and I've finally gotten started on the path of what I want as a career. Thank you all." This, is wonderful to hear. I am delighted that someone is following their dream of building science employment. That is awesome. I have some questions. I've noticed some framing crews in my area will nail wall plates to the subfloor first, then assemble studs to the top plate only. Then they have to manipulate these dangly wall sections like giant floppy combs into place before toe-nailing the studs down. I've heard this is because the framing inspector wants to be able to see 2 nails per stud on the bottom. This seems like a funny desire that's leading to poorer quality and slower processes. Any thoughts? Ian, you did a head slap immediately. This is the wackiest thing I've ever heard of.
It's absolute insanity.
Yeah, I don't know if there's another reason why they would be doing it, but I have heard of building inspectors wanting to see, changing processes to want to see nails, not letting people who are using zip tape the seams until they come for their framing inspection, things like that. I've heard that story before. I've never heard it in this context of the, having to toenail the studs to the bottom plates, but I have heard that sentiment before.
So I've seen framers put all their plates down, either exterior walls or exterior and interior walls, and then build the walls by picking them up again, right? But all the wall lengths are going to be correct. You do the layout while it's on the floor, and you can hopefully foresee any problems or anticipate chimney chases, anything that might interrupt the wall. And that makes a lot of sense to me. This makes no sense whatsoever because a toenail connection is way inferior versus end nailing. I don't understand.
Absolute insanity.
Why not just shoot one into the end and then toenail the 2 more from the top? It's at least stuff.
Or take a picture of the walls before raising them. I don't know.
I tried that with a short wall once in a basement as a method to be able to stand the wall up. It was an existing basement, so I put the plate down and I framed the wall exactly what he describes, right? And it was so
unwieldy.
It was so unwieldy, that I quickly realized I'll just double the bottom plates. So I did the same thing, putting the plate down, added another bottom plate, and then you can lift the wall up and just pop it up on the plate that you put down, and that's a way to raise a wall in a tight spot, but that has nothing to do with new construction.
Right.
If any of you listening have any reasons why someone might do this, I would love to hear them. Number two, in the same vein, windows are almost universally installed before the WRB. This seems counter to all of the best practices information I've seen, as well as manufacturer installation details. So what's the trick to no problems when this is the order of operations? Well, it shouldn't be the order of operations, right? That's just not the way to do it.
It shouldn't
Yeah.
be, but also if done correctly with the right materials, it's totally fine. If you were to use the right tape flashings to flash your window opening and the areas surrounding it, and then you taped that assembly to your WRB, I would argue that that's fine. But
I agree.
it's a lot of things that you would have to be using the right material and using it correctly.
And I got to think it's harder to do. What would be the rationale for installing the windows for us? Of course, to dry in the house to some degree. Is that maybe why?
I think it would be to dry in the house.
I mean, it doesn't take that long to put the WRB on, but it does take a while to flash every window individually. So maybe that's why you would.
Maybe they're waiting for the building inspector to come and see the nails on the ceiling.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It's also possible that the rough framing crew does not do the WRB for some reason, but they do the windows. So in an effort to clear the framing crew out of the project, they install all the windows in advance of the siding crew.
That seems possible. Number three, when it comes to the issue of energy codes and who is the contractor to perform these new tasks, why isn't the obvious choice energy raters? Here we have these individuals trained in the house as a system thinking that currently don't get their hands dirty. They have the knowledge of how to tie processes and products together into cohesive control layers. They understand that doing a crappy job on said task undermines the entire thing. It seems like if you tell a builder, hey, you got to pay extra to have this new subcontractor tell you that you're doing stuff wrong, and then say, call me when you fix it and I'll come back. Well, of course, builders won't like this. Why is there this disconnect between raters and doing the tasks that can most affect the ratings? I hope this makes sense because this is exactly where I want to corner my market. Anyway, keep up the great work, and thanks again. Steve, thanks for the excellent questions. We'll get to this one. But I wish you great success in your career. I think that's awesome.
You need a Sprinter van, a bunch of Festool drills. You need some really fancy like Diamondback workwear. What else do you need that's really
Duct
expensive?
Blaster. He's going to need a DG 1000 or two manometers.
You need some really awesome German pencils that are monogrammed with your company name. Some Red Wing Heritage boots. What else can I think
monogrammed
of?
workwear of every persuasion generally, right? Yeah.
I should have gotten you at least 100 grand plus the Sprinter there, Steve.
How much money does that gas company have? That would be my first question. So is there a disconnect between what energy raters do presently, and could they be employed as subcontractors to do air sealing and house as a systems thinking?
I do think, I remember a very long time ago, maybe, 15 years ago, I was listening to Peter Pfeiffer. He's an architect and very sort of early adopter of green building practices. And he's in Austin, Texas. And I saw him at a conference once, and he was talking about building a high performance house and this whole in-house as a system thinking. And he didn't invoke the energy rater, and I'm not sure that was as well known of a job as it is today, but he did say that every project needs someone. He was calling him a passionate enthusiast because he said in his work, sometimes it's him, sometimes it's the builder, sometimes it's the homeowner, but it needs one person that is connecting all the dots between all the trades and making sure that, everything that needs to get done for the house to perform the way it's intended to perform is getting done. And so I think that an energy rater or an energy performance consultant or a performance consultant, whatever you want to call it, could definitely fill that role on projects, especially projects with architects, builders, subs that haven't yet caught up to caught up on the building science and what it actually takes to design and build a high performance house. I think the disconnect is money, right? You're adding,
and no one wants to pay for it.
You're just adding another person who needs to get paid to an already expensive, endeavor.
I would add to that the purpose of the energy rater, in my understanding, is that they are an independent auditor of what the workers have done. And by themselves being the workers, they would lose their independence and thus their ability to certify and audit the work that has been done. It's a little bit like how the passive house hierarchy has the certifications for builders, for tradespeople, for designers, but then they have a separate one for the actual rater who comes in and says, yes, you met the standards.
So that's a great point, Ian, and it makes me think of like energy auditors who are doing audits on existing houses. They probably shouldn't also be the ones getting paid to do the work, because you get all sorts of conflicts of interest happening. But in this case, could the rater not so much be doing the work, but could they just be more involved in the process and the follow through and just doing inspections at certain times, just ensuring that what needs to get done is getting done, rather than sort of like helping guide performance at the beginning of the process and then coming in and testing at the end, but just being more involved through the build.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things that we're doing with it's not a certified passive house, but it is basically being built to passive house standards, is I wanted a third blower door pre-insulation. And there was a lot of back and forth between myself and Christy, the architect at TDS, who's also a certified passive house designer, that blower door test really isn't doing anything, because we are going to use Intello on the inside of the double stud wall assembly. But my point was, that's a great opportunity for our team to be able to fix really big, easy to find holes in the assembly with membranes, with the blue skin that we're putting on the outside. So by doing it after the Intello is done, now it's, double stud, dense pack cellulose is full, the lid's full. Like, we don't have.
It's harder to fix anything that's a problem, right? Yeah. What do you think the additional cost would that be for that additional test?
For us, it's $350. The blower door guy that we use, $350.
That seems
comes
well
out,
worth it to me, right?
Door. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think most folks who are interested in this subject would agree that it's the air barrier integrity that is probably the most important thing we need to pay attention to. And, I've heard the person whose responsibility it is described as an air sealing specialist. You can come up with the acronym appropriate to that person's work. And their job is to just make sure that things are sealed up before it's too late. And I think if we could just get that step done, it would make more reliable, more resilient buildings.
I think that if I remember right, I think it was Jake Bruton who told me, Jake is a builder in Missouri, and he generally subs out a lot of the work on his projects. He's just got a small crew, but I believe he assigns one of his crew on every project to be sort of not only the person who ensures that the air sealing is getting done, but just sort of does quality control on all the air sealing. So just sort of that's their job on the project. Just double check everything. And that makes sense to me. And, once you've been through that once, it would be easy enough to just make sure that it's getting done.
I think you get your subs to go through it once or twice too, and they start to learn, I'm sure, very quickly where the choke points are with their work and the air barrier, and everyone can plan ahead how to prevent problems.
Avoid big bundles of wire and tubing.
And individual refrigeration lines too, right? Ian, is another problem. One pipe per hole or one wire per hole is what I hear. I love that there's still the thinking is still evolving to make this work easier, because we've been through it now for years, hopefully, and it used to be that he had to solve these problems on every project, but I think once you get a couple under your belt, it's got to be way easier. This comes from Shawn in Atlanta. Hi, FHB. I've been very busy with school and work and unfortunately fell behind in the podcast. I've also been in landscaping mode and have taken down several trees and removed 40-plus lawn bags of yard waste. Good news. I recently caught up and have several comments from past episodes. I also have a question at the end. Responding to questions about first-time homebuyer questions to ask, buying a house is likely the most expensive asset or purchase one will make in their life. I think purchasing a home without the traditional team of closing attorney and real estate agent is ill-advised. These are professionals who do this every day and they know where the pain points are. Get an inspection and pay for all the extra things, sewer scope, thermal imaging, radon, etc. This might seem unnecessary and costly, but this is your last shot to uncover an issue that could cost tens of thousands of dollars later and renegotiate the purchase price. I also highly recommend a boundary survey and staking out the property. This uncovered a discrepancy between the survey and easements on our property that required back and forth with our closing attorney before closing. I agree. What do you guys think? This recent landscape of just paying cash and forgoing all contingencies seems bonkers to me.
Even if you're going to do that and forego the contingencies, you should still do the inspections for your own understanding.
Yeah. I mean, I would want to know if I'm going to need to spend tens of thousands of dollars in the near future, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And also it gives you the opportunity. I remember one time I was talking to a company that makes water heaters. I don't remember who it was, but I was asking why they don't sell as many of their higher performing products. And the answer, which was a new answer to me at the time, was that because water heaters are usually emergency purchases. The water heater goes, you need hot water, you're going to run out and you're going to buy something off the shelf. You're going to buy what's available. So knowing what's coming, knowing what you might have to do will give you time to do research, to determine what the best product is, the right product for you, or the best system for you, and to save for it.
That's an interesting point, Brian. Our plumber that we use for a lot of projects, one of the first things he'll look at is the date on when the water heater was put in. And then he'll look at it and go, my crew's already going to be here, so you've got the sunk cost of 2 plumbers on your job. It's really just
the plumbing system drained and all of it, right? And it's not an emergency like it is when you're
already 8 years old. They typically last 10 years or whatever the numbers are. It's a lot cheaper to do it now, and then that does give somebody the ability to choose based on the type of equipment they would want, not the emergency. What does the big box store have that I can go pick up?
Yeah.
All true. The subject of dehumidification in Zone 3A, whole house dehumidification here is almost a requirement. I sent an email responding to Ian last year when he needed a dehumidifier for his downstairs. That email is below this one and has the best comments. I will not repeat and for all of that, but here is it in case you want to look at it. The only things I will add to that email is how to sell this to a spouse. My wife thought the purchase was not necessary. However, she is now a firm believer and tells her friends. Apparently, the reduction in humidity in our house has significantly reduced the amount of time it takes for her to get ready in the morning. Humidity and hair do not play well together and causes styled hair to become frizzy as soon as you step outside. She also comments that her skin is in better shape, but I'm not sure what that means exactly. Another thing to remember is that you might be able to raise the cooling target as the humidity drops. Most people end up lowering their cooling target temp because of how uncomfortable the high humidity can be. We ended up raising our thermostat 2 degrees once our humidity issue was under control. I've said that before too. You don't need as much air conditioning if the humidity isn't high. I heard from folks on the Gulf Coast when I was down there recently, too, that standalone dehumidification systems are something that they install as routine now, especially in high-performance homes, because the cooling loads are so low that you just need something to deal with the interior humidity.
They can be energy pigs, though.
Dehumidifiers.
Whole house dehumidifiers.
Yeah, because they're big, right? They're like
Yep.
tons of cooling. Yeah. Do you have problems with humidity in your high performance home, Brian?
Not so far. Well, let me be more clear about that. When we first moved in, I was taken by how high the humidity levels were for a few months. But I quickly remembered some warnings. I think from Mike Gurton at one point, and I think it was actually responding to someone on a podcast about how post construction, a lot of construction materials are still releasing moisture into your house, and it just took a few months for that to drop. Summertime, we're sort of windows open kind of family, so we live with whatever the humidity levels are outside, and if it gets uncomfortable, we fire up the mini splits and cool things off and dry things out a little bit. And this summer's been particularly humid here. We had a few weeks that were sort of off the charts, and I was pleasantly impressed with how nicely the mini splits worked to just kind of dry the house out in really in no time at all.
To plug the after show again, we're going to talk about your house some more and its low energy needs in our after show discussion titled "How Low Can You Go Near Net Zero?" And we'll talk about your low energy bills associated with your heating and cooling, which I find really pretty interesting. What do you think, Ian? Is your house hard to control in the Midwest's high humidity summers?
No, we just have that little El Cheapo humidifier that I bought. It runs during the summer months, and the rest of the year, it's pretty good. I think largely due to the waterproofing work that we did around the basement.
What do you think about Shawn's recommendation? Just get a dehumidifier. I think you were somewhat hesitant because of the energy penalty, but no?
Overkill for me.
Yeah?
For the whole house dehumidifier, wouldn't it?
But your portable unit was a wise investment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it was a $100 unit from whichever big box store I drove by that day.
Mm-hmm. Does your central AC system, Jeff, keep your house in good comfort?
Yeah, it definitely does.
And it's one zone, or do you have it zoned?
It's two zones, but my house is so open, it's kind of ridiculous.
What are supposed to be the zones?
Just upstairs and downstairs, first floor and second floor. And so by the time the second floor heats up, the first floor is a little chilly, or cools down rather.
Mm-hmm.
It's that monster formal staircase that you have in the foyer of your home, right?
It's a big open loft.
Yeah,
The whole center of my house is basically one room.
Shawn in Atlanta had a question. He says, I'm about to replace the weather stripping on the door to my garage. I've been perplexed by the door jamb since we moved in. The door jamb has these very thin pieces of metal stapled along the sides and top. They are on top of the hinges, so they were installed last or close to it. They do not seem to serve any purpose, and I plan on removing them and filling the staple holes. They are likely original to the home, which was built in 1986. Any idea what these are for? Shawn, MBA, and engineering/physics student. Any carpenter who's been in the trades for any period of time knows exactly what this is. It's bronze weather stripping, and it's kind of I don't know, do you see this anymore, Ian?
When I worked in New York, it was actually a pretty common install that we would do on older homes. There's a few places, I think notably there's Killian Hardware in Philadelphia that sells a lot of spring bronze and interlocking door thresholds for carpenters who still work on older homes that have the original spring bronze weather stripping. It's great stuff when it's working and properly installed.
Can you describe it? Because I don't know if folks who are unfamiliar know what the heck we're talking about.
It's just a piece of metal which typically has some kind of bend in it that keeps it springing out into the door opening. And typically it's nailed with bronze nails. I rarely see it stapled as Shawn sent in those photos. But the door then presses into it and the metal presses against the door, creating a seal. And typically it's used in conjunction with an interlocking threshold where the door itself will have a rabbeted bottom and another piece of bronze weather stripping that will hook into a groove on the threshold, creating the seal at the bottom of the door.
What I think is cool about it is it doesn't make the door hard to close like some other styles of weather stripping, and it's a very traditional look. I don't know if it's really especially airtight. I'm guessing it would vary on how well it's installed.
Right, and then as well, you need a larger rabbet on the door frame to accommodate it.
One of my early memories as I don't know, it was probably 6 years old, maybe 7, 10. And I was staying with my grandmother who lived in an apartment complex, and there was a carpenter going around replacing all of the entry doors to these various buildings. And I was mesmerized because he was using a Porter cable portaplaner and fitting these doors and putting all new bronze weather stripping in. And I still remember him grabbing a corner of it and just yanking on the existing and ripping it off the jamb. And I thought that was just amazing. Like he had pulled a sword from a stone. I was just like, whoa. Yeah. So I think it's cool. You don't see it much anymore. And folks who are into it are really into it. If you have carpenters who are enthusiasts, they will talk with great joy about bronze weather stripping, I have observed. Did you know what this was, Brian?
I did.
Yeah.
Unlike Ian, I've never installed it, but I have encountered it and I have removed it. Yeah.
Jeff, you have this anywhere?
The house I grew up in, we had it on just one door. It was the door to the garage, but it was an outside, from the front porch into the garage. It was not into the house, which I thought was odd. But
Patrick, I would think that at your Greenwich manse, you would have this on your doors that maybe go from the salon to the rear.
I'm waiting for
garden.
the right carpenter to renew all of my bronze weather stripping, Ian. So if you're in the neighborhood, maybe you'll come by and you can refresh all that for me. And I can watch you rip it off the door jamb with great interest. Folks, I hope you'll stay tuned for our members only all access after show. And oh my God, I butchered that once again. So, hey folks, I hope you'll stay tuned for our podcast after show where we're going to discuss how low can you go net zero with Brian and Ian about their respective house builds. And thank you very much always for the questions and comments about the show. It really helps us. All right, stay tuned. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Jeff, Ian, and Brian for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening. Stay tuned for the after show.